The air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant car exhaust. It was late October in New York City, and the streets were quiet except for the occasional hum of a passing taxi or the chatter of pedestrians hurrying home. Emily Carter tightened her scarf around her neck as she stepped out of St. Mary's Hospital, her tired eyes scanning the dimly lit sidewalk. She had just finished another long shift, her feet aching from hours spent running between rooms, her mind heavy with the weight of patients' stories. But none of that mattered now. She was finally free to go home. As she walked toward the bus stop, something unusual caught her eye. A man sat slumped on the curb near the hospital entrance, his shoulders hunched against the chill. His clothes were torn and dirty, his face obscured by a tangle of dark hair and an unshaven beard. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days, and the faint smell of sweat wafted toward her as she approached. Most people would have walked past without a second glance, but Emily stopped. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, crouching down to meet his gaze. Her voice was gentle, tinged with concern. The man lifted his head slowly, revealing piercing blue eyes that seemed oddly out of place amidst his disheveled appearance. There was a sadness in them, but also a flicker of something else, gratitude, perhaps, or maybe just surprise at being noticed. "I'm fine," he muttered, his voice rough and hoarse. "Just resting." Emily frowned. Resting? On a freezing sidewalk in the middle of the night? She didn't believe him for a second. Still, she nodded and offered him a small smile. "Do you need anything? Food? Water?" For a moment, the man hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust her. Then he sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging even further. "I could use some food," he admitted quietly, "but I don't have any money." Emily felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to struggle, to count every penny and worry about how to pay rent. Though she wasn't rich herself, she couldn't stand by and do nothing. "Wait here," she said firmly. "I'll be right back." She hurried across the street to a small diner she often visited after work. The neon sign above the door buzzed faintly, casting a pink glow over the pavement. Inside, the warmth hit her immediately, along with the comforting aroma of coffee and fried onions. She ordered a hot sandwich and a cup of soup, paying with the last few dollars in her wallet. The cashier raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything as Emily grabbed the bag and headed back outside. When she returned, the man was still sitting where she'd left him, staring blankly at the ground. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. "Here," she said, handing him the bag. "It's not much, but it's warm." He took the food cautiously, his fingers brushing hers for a brief moment. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible. For the first time, he met her gaze directly, and Emily saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. It made her heart ache. "You're welcome," she replied simply. "What's your name?" "Daniel," he said after a pause. "Daniel Harper." "I'm Emily." She smiled again, trying to put him at ease. "Listen, Daniel, if you ever need help or just someone to talk to, you can call me." She pulled a pen from her coat pocket and scribbled her number on a napkin before handing it to him. Daniel stared at the napkin for a long moment, then nodded. "I appreciate it," he said quietly, "more than you know." They sat there for a while longer, talking sporadically. Daniel shared bits and pieces of his story. He used to have a good job, a house, a life. But things went wrong, bad investments, bad decisions, and now he had nothing. Emily listened intently, nodding occasionally, but never prying too deeply. She understood the importance of letting someone speak without judgment. Eventually, this cold became too much to bear, and Emily reluctantly stood up. "I should get going," she said. "Take care of yourself, okay?" Daniel nodded again, clutching the napkin tightly in one hand. "You too, Emily, and thank you, again." As she walked away, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter meant something more than just a random act of kindness. Something about Daniel's eyes stayed with her, haunting her thoughts as she boarded the bus and headed home. Little did she know, this chance meeting would change both their lives forever. The days passed quickly for Emily Carter, filled with the usual chaos of her life. Between working long shifts at St. Mary's Hospital and juggling bills that seemed to pile up no matter how hard she tried, she barely had time to think about Daniel Harper. Still, his face lingered in the back of her mind, the piercing blue eyes, the weary tone of his voice, the way he had clutched that napkin like it was a lifeline. She wondered if he was okay, if he had found somewhere warm to stay or managed to eat since their meeting. But she didn't dwell on it too much. Life had taught her not to expect miracles. Then, one evening, just as she was finishing another grueling shift, her phone buzzed in her pocket. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. Hesitant but curious, she answered. "Hello, Emily?" The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost unsure. "It's Daniel." From the other, "Night." Her heart skipped a beat. "Daniel, are you all right?" "I'm managing," he replied, his tone cautious. "I wanted to thank you again for the food and for listening. It meant a lot." "You don't have to thank me," Emily said softly. "I meant what I said. If you need anything, just call." There was a pause, and then Daniel spoke again. "Actually, there is something. Could you give me a ride to a shelter downtown? I've been trying to get there, but it's farther than I thought." Emily hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. "Of course." "Where you now?" They arranged to meet near the hospital, and when Emily arrived, she spotted Daniel sitting on the same curb where they'd first met. He looked slightly better this time. His hair was combed, and his clothes, though still worn, were cleaner. He stood up as she pulled over, offering a small smile of gratitude. "Thank you for coming," he said as he climbed into the passenger seat. His voice carried a mix of relief and embarrassment. "It's no trouble," Emily assured him. "Where?" "To?" He gave her directions to a men's shelter a few miles away, and they drove in silence for a while. The city lights blurred past the windows, casting faint reflections on the windshield. Emily glanced at Daniel out of the corner of her eye, noticing the tension in his posture. Finally, she broke the quiet. "How have you been holding up?" He sighed, leaning his head against the window. "It's been tough. Some days are better than others. But I'm trying to figure things out. That's all anyone can do," Emily said gently. "One step at a time." Daniel nodded, though. His expression remained troubled. "You're kinder than most people I've met lately. Most folks wouldn't even look at me, let alone offer help." "Well, maybe they should try looking a little closer," Emily replied with a wry smile. "Everyone has a story." The rest of the ride passed in comfortable conversation. Daniel shared more fragments of his past, a thriving business he'd built from scratch, the betrayal that led to its collapse, the slow unraveling of his life. Emily listened intently, asking questions when appropriate, but never pushing too hard. By the time they reached the shelter, she felt like she understood him a little better. "Here we are," she said as she parked outside the building. "Do you want me to wait while you check in?" "No, I'll be fine," Daniel said quickly. He turned to face her, his gaze steady. "Emily, I can't tell you how much this means to me. Not just the ride, but everything. You've done so much already." She shook her head, dismissing his gratitude. "Just take care of yourself, okay? And remember, you can always call if you need anything." "I will," he promised. "Thank you." For the next few weeks, Daniel kept his word. He called Emily. Occasionally, always polite and respectful, asking for small favors, a ride to a job interview, advice on navigating public services, or simply someone to talk to when loneliness crept in. Each time, Emily obliged without hesitation, finding herself drawn to his quiet determination and vulnerability. Their conversations grew longer and deeper, revealing pieces of their lives they rarely shared with others. Through these exchanges, Emily learned more about Daniel's world before it fell apart. He had been an entrepreneur, starting a tech company in his early 20s and turning it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise within a decade. But success came with its own challenges: greedy partners, mounting pressure, and ultimately, a devastating betrayal that left him penniless. Despite his losses, Daniel carried himself with a quiet dignity that impressed Emily. He wasn't bitter. Instead, he seemed determined to rebuild his life, one difficult step at a time. In turn, Daniel admired Emily's resilience. She told him about growing up in a modest household, watching her parents work multiple jobs to make ends meet. She dreamed of becoming a nurse to help others, inspired by the kindness of a doctor who once treated her sick younger brother. Though her career brought long hours and low pay, she loved it because it allowed her to make a difference. However small, their connection deepened with each passing day, though neither dared to name it. For Emily, Daniel represented a glimpse into a world she had never known, a world of ambition, wealth, and opportunity. Yet, beneath the surface, he was just as human as anyone else, struggling with fears and regrets. For Daniel, Emily embodied everything he had forgotten during his rise to success: compassion, humility, and the simple joy of helping others without expecting anything in return. One chilly November evening, Daniel called Emily with an unusual request. "Can we meet tomorrow?" he asked. "At the park near the hospital? There's something I want to show you." Surprised but intrigued, Emily agreed. "Sure. What time? Around noon?" "I'll be there," she said, hanging up with a clearer sense of anticipation. As she prepared for bed that night, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. She didn't know what Daniel wanted to show her, but she trusted him enough to go along with it. Little did she realize this meeting would change everything, not just for Daniel, but for both of them. The next day, Emily arrived at the park near St. Mary's Hospital a little before noon. The air was crisp, and the golden sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. She spotted Daniel sitting on a bench by the pond, his posture relaxed but alert. As she approached, she noticed something different about him. His clothes were clean and neatly pressed, his hair combed back, and his face freshly shaved. He looked like an entirely different person. "Daniel?" she called out, her voice tinged with surprise. "Is that you?" He stood up and turned to face her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Hey, Emily. Thanks for coming. You look amazing," she said honestly, tilting her head as she studied him. "What's going on? Did you get a job or something?" Daniel chuckled softly, though there was a hint of nervousness in his laugh. "Not exactly. But I wanted to explain something to you, something important." Emily's curiosity deepened. "Okay, what is it?" He gestured for her to sit down on the bench beside him. For a moment, he stared out at the water, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he turned to her, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "Emily, the truth is," he began, pausing to take a deep breath, "I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I'm not just some guy who lost everything because of bad luck," he admitted, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "That part is true. I did lose my business, my house, everything, but the way I presented myself to you wasn't entirely real." Emily's mind raced, trying to piece together what he was saying. "Are you telling me you're not really broke?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm not broke." In fact, I'm far from it. I'm the CEO of HarperTech, a tech company worth billions. Or at least, I was until recently. Emily blinked, stunned. Wait, you're a millionaire? A billionaire. Technically, Daniel corrected, though his tone lacked any trace of arrogance. But I gave up all of that, the suits, the cars, the fancy lifestyle, to see how people would treat me when I had nothing. To understand what it feels like to be invisible, to be ignored because of how you look or what you wear. Emily sat silently, absorbing his words. She felt a mix of emotions: shock, disbelief, even a flicker of betrayal. But beneath it all, she couldn't ignore the sincerity in his voice. "Why would you do that?" she asked finally. "Why would someone like you pretend to be homeless?" "I needed answers," Daniel replied simply. "After everything fell apart, I started questioning humanity. Was it really possible for people to care about each other without expecting something in return? Or was kindness just a transaction, a favor exchanged for future gain?" He paused, looking at her intently. "Then I met you. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care about my money or my status. You saw me as a person, someone who needed help. And you gave it freely, without hesitation." Emily felt her cheeks flush. "I was just doing what anyone would have done." "No," Daniel said, firmly, "not everyone. Most people walked past me without a second glance. Some even treated me like I was less than human. But you reminded me of what truly matters: compassion, empathy, humanity." His words struck a chord deep within her. Despite her initial shock, she realized that Daniel's intentions weren't malicious. He wasn't trying to deceive her. He was searching for meaning, for proof that goodness still existed in the world. And somehow, she had become a part of that journey. "I don't know what to say," Emily admitted quietly. "This is a lot to process." "I understand," Daniel sighed. "And I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to speak to me again. But I wanted you to know the truth. You deserve that much." They sat in silence for a while, the gentle rustle of leaves filling the space between them. Emily stared at the pond, watching the ripples spread across the surface. She thought about everything Daniel had told her: the rise and fall of his empire, the pain of betrayal, the loneliness he must have felt during his experiment. It was overwhelming, but also strangely humbling. Finally, she spoke. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I appreciate it." Daniel exhaled sharply, relief washing over his face. "You have no idea how much that means to me." "But why are you telling me now?" she asked. "Why reveal all of this after keeping it hidden for so long?" "Because I couldn't keep pretending," he confessed. "Every time we talked, every time you helped me or listened to me, I felt guilty for lying to you. You've shown me so much kindness, and I wanted to repay that, not with money, but with honesty." Emily nodded slowly, considering his words. "So what happens now? Are you going back to your old life?" "Yes," Daniel replied, "but not the same way it was before. Meeting you has changed me. I want to use my resources to make a difference, to help people like you help others every day. And I'd like it if you were part of that." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" I want to get to know you better," Daniel said, his voice softening. "Not as the man in tatters, but as Daniel Harper. If you'll let me." Emily hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. This revelation had shifted the foundation of their relationship, but it hadn't erased the connection they'd built. Slowly, she smiled. "All right, let's start fresh." Relief and joy lit up Daniel's face. "Thank you, Emily. You won't regret this." As they left the park together, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. Life had a funny way of surprising her, and this twist was unlike anything she'd ever imagined. But one thing was certain: whatever lay ahead, it would be anything but ordinary. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Emily began to rebuild their relationship from the ground up. This time, there were no secrets, no disguises, or hidden agendas. Daniel reintroduced himself as the man behind Harper Tech, showing Emily glimpses of his world without overwhelming her. He took her to a quiet cafe near Central Park, where they spent hours talking about their dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. For Emily, it was both exhilarating and intimidating. She had never imagined herself sitting across from a billionaire, sipping coffee and sharing stories like they were old friends. Daniel made an effort to keep things simple. He didn't show up in luxury cars or shower her with expensive gifts. Instead, he focused on getting to know her, the real her. He asked about her childhood, her passion for nursing, and the challenges she faced in her daily life. In turn, Emily learned more about Daniel's journey, how he had started Harper Tech in a tiny apartment with nothing but a laptop and a dream, how he had fought tooth and nail to build it into a global empire, and how its loss had left him questioning everything he thought he knew about success and happiness. Their conversations often turned philosophical. One evening, as they strolled through the park, Daniel admitted, "I used to think money could solve anything, that if I had enough of it, I'd be untouchable. But losing everything taught me that wealth isn't what makes life meaningful. It's the people you care about and who care about you." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "That's something I've always believed. Money helps, sure, but it doesn't fix everything. Sometimes it even creates problems." "You're right," Daniel said, his tone tinged with admiration. "You've lived a harder life than I ever have, yet you still find joy in helping others. That's something I want to learn from you." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Despite their differences, she realized they shared a common goal: to make the world a little better, one small act of kindness at a time. As their bond grew stronger, Daniel invited Emily to experience parts of his life that he had kept hidden. During their earlier meetings, he brought her to a charity gala hosted by Harper Tech, introducing her to colleagues and business associates as the woman who reminded me why I started this company in the first place. At first, Emily felt out of place among the glittering chandeliers, designer dresses, and polished smiles. But Daniel stayed by her side the entire evening, making sure she felt comfortable and included. To her surprise, many of the guests were genuinely interested in her work as a nurse. They asked thoughtful questions about the challenges facing healthcare workers and marveled at her dedication to her patients. By the end of the night, Emily found herself enjoying the event more than she expected. She even managed to share a few laughs with some of Daniel's closest friends, who teased him good-naturedly about finally finding someone who could keep him grounded. But not everyone was supportive. Some of Daniel's associates whispered, behind closed doors, speculating about Emily's intentions. "Is she after his money?" One woman murmured to another during a break in the program. "She doesn't seem like his type." When Emily overheard the comment, she felt a pang of hurt but also determination. She knew she couldn't control what others thought of her, but she refused to let their opinions define her relationship with Daniel. If anything, their doubts only strengthened her resolve to prove them wrong. Meanwhile, Emily's own circle of friends and coworkers reacted with skepticism when she mentioned Daniel. Her best friend, Lisa, raised an eyebrow during their weekly lunch date. "Wait, so this guy you've been helping is actually a billionaire? And now you're dating him?" "It's not like that," Emily insisted, stirring her soup absent-mindedly. "We're just figuring things out." "Figuring things out?" Lisa repeated, raising an eyebrow. Be careful. Guys like that come with baggage." "Are you sure you're ready for all that?" "I know it's complicated," Emily admitted, "but Daniel's different. He's not the same person he was before. He's trying to change for the better." Lisa sighed, shaking her head. I hope you're right. Just don't lose sight of who you are, okay? Emily promised she wouldn't, but deep down, she wondered if Lisa had a point. Could she really fit into Daniel's world without losing herself in the process? Despite the challenges, Daniel and Emily continued to navigate their growing relationship with patience and understanding. Daniel made a conscious effort to immerse himself in Emily's world, volunteering at St. Mary's Hospital and shadowing her during her shifts. At first, the staff eyed him suspicious act of kindness. Emily replied simply, "Just take care of yourself, okay? And remember, you can always call if you need anything." "I will," he promised. "Thank you." For the next few weeks, Daniel kept his word. He called Emily occasionally, always polite and respectful, asking for small favors, a ride to a job interview, advice on navigating public services, or simply someone to talk to when loneliness crept in. Each time, Emily obliged without hesitation, finding herself drawn to his quiet determination and vulnerability. Their conversations grew longer and deeper, revealing pieces of their lives they rarely shared with others. Through these exchanges, Emily learned more about Daniel's world before it fell apart. He had been an entrepreneur, starting a tech company in his early 20s and turning it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise within a decade. But success came with its own challenges: greedy partners, mounting pressure, and ultimately, a devastating betrayal that left him penniless. Despite his losses, Daniel carried himself with a quiet dignity that impressed Emily. He wasn't bitter. Instead, he seemed determined to rebuild his life, one difficult step at a time. In turn, Daniel admired Emily's resilience. She told him about growing up in a modest household, watching her parents work multiple jobs to make ends meet. She dreamed of becoming a nurse to help others, inspired by the kindness of a doctor who once treated her sick younger brother. Though her career brought long hours and low pay, she loved it because it allowed her to make a difference. However small, their connection deepened with each passing day, though neither dared to name it. For Emily, Daniel represented a glimpse into a world she had never known, a world of ambition, wealth, and opportunity. Yet beneath the surface, he was just as human as anyone else, struggling with fears and regrets. For Daniel, Emily embodied everything he had forgotten during his rise to success: compassion, humility, and the simple joy of helping others without expecting anything in return. One chilly November evening, Daniel called Emily with an unusual request. "Can we meet tomorrow?" he asked. "At the park near the hospital? There's something I want to show you." Surprised but intrigued, Emily agreed. "Sure. What time? Around noon?" "I'll be there," she said, hanging up with a clearer sense of anticipation. As she prepared for bed that night, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. She didn't know what Daniel wanted to show her, but she trusted him enough to go along with it. Little did she realize this meeting would change everything, not just for Daniel, but for both of them. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel and Emily's relationship continued to deepen. They weren't just two people from different worlds trying to understand each other. They were becoming partners in every sense of the word. Daniel made a conscious effort to step out of his luxurious bubble and immerse himself in Emily's world. He spent more time volunteering at St. Mary's Hospital, helping with tasks like organizing supplies, assisting patients, and even accompanying Emily on her rounds when she had a particularly busy shift. The staff, who had initially been wary of him, began to warm up as they saw how genuinely committed he was to making a difference. Emily appreciated Daniel's efforts, but she also noticed the subtle challenges that came with their growing bond. For one thing, their lives were still vastly different. While Daniel attended high-profile meetings and galas, Emily juggled long hours at the hospital and struggled to pay her bills. Their schedules often clashed, leaving them with little time to spend together. And while Daniel tried hard to blend into her world, there were moments when Emily felt the weight of their differences pressing down on her. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, Emily sat on her couch staring at her phone. Daniel had called earlier to invite her to another charity event, but she had declined, citing fatigue. Truthfully, she was starting to feel overwhelmed by the constant spotlight that came with being associated with someone as wealthy and influential as Daniel. Strangers whispered behind her back, questioning her intentions. Some accused her of being a gold digger, while others assumed she was using Daniel for his money. Even some of her coworkers treated her differently now, unsure of how to act around her. Frustrated and tired, Emily finally picked up her phone and dialed Daniel's number. When he answered, his voice was warm and familiar. "Hey, Em, how are you holding up?" "I'm okay," she replied, though her tone betrayed her exhaustion. "But I need to talk to you about something." "Of course," Daniel said quickly, his voice tinged with concern. "What's wrong?" "It's just everything," Emily admitted. "People keep judging me, Daniel. My friends, my coworkers, even strangers. They all think I'm only with you because of your money. And honestly, it's getting to me." Daniel sighed heavily, and for a moment there was silence on the line. "I know it's not easy," he said finally. "I've heard the whispers too. But you have to believe me. Emily, I don't care what anyone else thinks. All that matters is how I feel about you." "I know," Emily said softly, "and I trust you. It's just, sometimes I wonder if we're too different. Your world is so far removed from mine. Are we really supposed to fit together?" Daniel hesitated before responding. "You're right, we come from different places. But isn't that what makes you stronger? You've taught me things I never would have learned on my own. Patience, humility, the value of hard work. And I want to do the same for you, to show you that you deserve happiness, no matter where you come from." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. She knew Daniel meant every word he said, but it didn't make the doubts disappear completely. Still, she couldn't deny the way her heart raced whenever he smiled at her or the comfort she found in his presence. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she admitted quietly. "You'll never have to find out," Daniel promised. "We'll figure this out together, okay? No matter what." Despite the challenges, Daniel and Emily refused to let external pressures tear them apart. They leaned on each other during difficult times, finding strength in their shared values and mutual respect. Daniel continued to use his resources to support causes close to Emily's heart, funding scholarships for nursing students and donating equipment to underfunded hospitals. In return, Emily introduced Daniel to the simple joys of life, cooking meals together, taking long walks through the city, and spending quiet evenings watching movies on her tiny TV. Their contrasting lifestyles became less of a barrier and more of an opportunity to learn from each other. Emily marveled at Daniel's ability to solve problems with logic and precision, while Daniel admired her instinctive compassion and unwavering optimism. Together, they balanced each other out, creating a partnership built on trust and understanding. One weekend, Daniel surprised Emily with a trip to a small lakeside cabin he had rented for the weekend. Nestled in the woods, the cozy retreat offered a much-needed escape from the chaos of their daily lives. As they sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and listening to the crackling logs, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. "This is perfect," she said, snuggling closer to Daniel. "Thank you for bringing me here. I wanted us to have some time away from everything," Daniel explained. "Just the two of us, without any distractions." For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to fully relax. She laughed freely, shared stories from her childhood, and even teased Daniel about his lack of camping skills. By the end of the weekend, she realized something important. Their differences didn't define them. What mattered most was the love and respect they had for each other. When they returned to the city, Daniel and Emily faced new challenges, but they tackled them as a team. Daniel's family, who had always expected him to marry someone from his social circle, expressed disapproval of his relationship with Emily. His mother, in particular, voiced her concerns during a tense family dinner. "Daniel, sweetheart, are you sure about this?" she asked, her tone laced with condescension. "She's lovely, of course, but do you really think she's prepared for the kind of life you lead?" Emily bristled at the comment, but Daniel intervened before she could respond. "Mom, I love Emily. She's smart, kind, and incredibly strong. She's exactly the kind of person I want by my side, not someone who fits into a mold." His mother frowned, but didn't press further, sensing the determination in his voice. Though the conversation left a bitter taste, Emily appreciated Daniel's unwavering support. It reinforced her belief that their love was worth fighting for. As the year drew to a close, Daniel and Emily reflected on how much their lives had changed since they first met. What had started as a chance encounter between a struggling nurse and a man in disguise had blossomed into a deep, meaningful connection. They had faced judgment, doubt, and obstacles, but none of it had shaken their resolve. If anything, their trials had brought them closer together. One snowy December evening, as they walked hand in hand through Central Park, Emily turned to Daniel with a smile. "Do you remember the first time we met?" she asked. "How could I forget?" Daniel replied, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "You saved me in more ways than one." Emily laughed softly. "I didn't know then that you'd end up changing." "My life, too." Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious yet tender. "Emily, I want you to know something. No matter what happens, I'll always be grateful for that night. You reminded me of who I used to be and who I want to be again. Because of you, I believe in love, kindness, and second chances." Tears pricked Emily's eyes as she squeezed his hand. "And because of you, I believe in myself." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the park, they both knew their journey was far from over. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, two hearts bound by a love that transcended wealth, status, and circumstance. Spring arrived in New York City, painting the streets with vibrant colors and filling the air with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. For Daniel and Emily, it was a season of renewal, not just in nature, but in their relationship as well. After months of navigating challenges and growing closer despite their differences, they had reached a new level of understanding and trust. Their bond felt stronger than ever, like a tree whose roots had grown deep enough to withstand any storm. Crisp morning, Daniel woke up early, his mind buzzing with excitement. Today was the day he had been planning for weeks, a day that would change both their lives forever. He dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet elegant outfit that reflected his desire to keep things genuine. As he left his penthouse apartment, he carried a small velvet box in his pocket, its weight reminding him of the enormity of what he was about to do. Meanwhile, Emily started her day like any other, heading to work at St. Mary's Hospital. Her shift was busy, filled with the usual chaos of patients needing care and colleagues rushing back and forth. But as she walked out of the hospital later that afternoon, she noticed something unusual: a bouquet of fresh daisies sitting on the curb near the entrance. Daisies were her favorite flower, and seeing them there made her heart skip a beat. "Daniel?" she called out, scanning the area. Sure enough, he appeared from around the corner, smiling nervously as he held another bunch of daisies in his hand. "I thought you could use some cheering up after your shift," he said, handing her the flowers. "Do you have time to take a walk with me?" Emily nodded, touched by the gesture. "Of course." They strolled through the familiar streets, eventually making their way to Central Park. The park was alive with activity children playing, couples lounging on blankets, and joggers weaving through the paths. Despite the lively atmosphere, Daniel seemed unusually quiet, his fingers brushing against the velvet box in his pocket. When they reached the same spot where they had first met all those months ago, Daniel stopped walking. He turned to face Emily, his blue eyes filled with emotion. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately, about everything we've been through together." Emily tilted her head, curious but unsure where this was going. "What is it, Daniel?" He took a deep breath before continuing. "You saved me, not just that night when I was sitting here broken and lost, but every day since then. You reminded me of what truly matters: kindness, humility, and love. And because of you, I've become a better person." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened, her heart pounding in anticipation. "Daniel, I know our worlds are different," he continued, his voice softening. "But I also know that doesn't matter. What matters is how we feel about each other. You're the most incredible woman I've ever met, and I can't imagine my life without you." With that, Daniel slowly got down on one knee, pulling the velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a beautiful diamond ring, its sparkle catching the sunlight. "Emily Carter," he said, looking up at her with pure adoration, "will you marry me?" For a moment, Emily stood frozen, overwhelmed by the enormity of the question. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she processed his words. Then, with a shaky smile, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Daniel's face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. They embraced tightly, surrounded by the sounds of birds chirping and distant laughter. It was a perfect moment, one neither of them would ever forget. News of their engagement spread quickly, drawing reactions from all corners of their lives. Daniel's family, though initially skeptical, warmed up to Emily once they saw how happy she made him. His mother even admitted during a private conversation, "You were right, Daniel. She's exactly who you need." Emily's friends and coworkers, who had once questioned her intentions, came to realize how deeply she cared for Daniel. Lisa, her best friend, hugged her tightly when she heard the news. "I'm so happy for you, Em," she said. "You deserve all the love in the world." As the couple began planning their wedding, they decided to keep things simple and meaningful. They chose a small ceremony in the park where they had first met, inviting only their closest family and friends. The decor featured daisies and fairy lights, creating an intimate and magical atmosphere. On the day of the wedding, Emily wore a modest yet elegant dress, while Daniel looked dashing in a classic suit. As they exchanged vows under a canopy of twinkling lights, their voices trembled with emotion. "You've taught me the true meaning of love," Daniel said, holding Emily's hands. "And I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." Emily smiled through her tears. "You've shown me that love isn't about wealth or status. It's about kindness, trust, and standing by each other no matter what. I couldn't ask for a better partner." After a ceremony, guests gathered for a joyful reception. There was laughter, dancing, and heartfelt speeches celebrating the unlikely love story that had brought Daniel and Emily together. Even strangers passing by stopped to admire the scene, moved by the obvious affection between the newlyweds. In the months that followed, Daniel and Emily settled into married life with ease. They continued to support each other's passions, blending their worlds in ways that enriched both of their lives. Daniel funded initiatives to improve healthcare access, inspired by Emily's dedication to her patients. In turn, Emily encouraged Daniel to stay grounded, reminding him of the importance of staying connected to the people he helped. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every challenge. From their chance meeting on a cold autumn night to their vows beneath the springtime stars, Daniel and Emily proved that love knows no boundaries. Together, they built a future rooted in compassion, humility, and unwavering devotion, a testament to the transformative power of kindness and connection.